Hello, everyone. Today we're here to start working on some plan sheets. If you watch the rest of my videos, we've already worked on some sheet seeds, some general note sheets, typical sections, and now I want to jump into actually doing some plan and profile sheets. So we're going to start with some plan sheets, and I have my Plan RD test open here. Basically what we're going to do is we're just going to cut some plan sheets along this alignment that has an arc, and I wanted to include one that has an arc because there's some things we need to do after we cut our plan sheets to kind of clean up the drawing boundary, because it has a hard time following the arc and then also trying to get that to fit within the sheet boundary, which you'll see as we do this. First thing I want to do is kind of go over setting up this sheet. And if any of you are, old SS10 users, you probably are used to creating a motif file or a container file. Well, we don't really need to do that anymore for our plan sheets and our profile sheets because the container file is essentially this default model. So what we want to do in this default model is attach everything that we want to see in our plan sheets and get it all set up and looking exactly the way we want it to look by turning levels on and off, turning references on and off, so that when they get placed into our drawing and sheet models, everything looks the way that we want it to look. So you can see here, I don't need to go through the entire list, but we've got drainage, we've got wetlands, alignment, design file, topo, drainage, existing, UTEX, all that stuff. What you'll see here is I have logical names set up for each of these, from most of them. And those logical names coincide with things that I've done inside my pen table to, in the case of something like a topo or a UTEX, that would, we've got DRX, topo, UTEX, that would screen it back and make it like gray so that it's not the emphasis of the sheet. And the other thing that I've done over here is this is called priority. And so this just affects how you see, however, all the references are kind of stacked. So if you think of, each reference as a sheet of paper that you can actually see through, a higher number, such as a 5, wherever I put the text file, here, this should be a 5 because I want my text to sit on top of everything. So the higher number sits on top of everything else. And as the numbers go down, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then down through the negatives, those things are on the bottom. And so if something is sitting on top of it, you won't see through it. So in this case, like, a text would sit on top of the UTEX line here, or the right away. Right away is usually 3. And so that'll be sitting on top of some of these other elements. So it just helps kind of clean up the presentation of the lines and makes the ones that you want people to see the most sit on the top. So we've got kind of two things here. We've got logical name, which helps with our pen table and setting up the colors that we want things to appear as. And we've got the priority, which helps the most important elements sit on top. So now that we've gotten that, we can begin setting up our name boundaries here. So I'm just going to do some 40 scale. You can do 40 or 50 or whatever. You just want to make sure whatever you're doing, you've got it set up here in your annotation scale. And so we'll click this name boundary tool up here, and a little different from the previous videos, we want to do this civil plan. And so what this is going to do is draw plan sheets based on alignment, but we can continue to use that project 11 by 17 plan only that we've been using previously. And if you wanted to create plan and profile sheets, this is where you would use plan over profile and set up the plan boundaries. I've done plan and profile sheets at times, but what I find is you quickly run out of space in both the plan and the profile views. for all of your labeling, and especially in a road like this where we've got a divided highway with 4 lanes, the width of the right of way is not going to be very conducive to putting it on half of a plan sheet. Same thing with the profile sheets. Typically, you might be able to display your profile easy enough, but so in the past we've had to put drainage on there, and since they have started to do away with some of these large format sheets that we've been seeing, um, I'm not really sure how that's going to go as far as like returning to putting drainage on profiles, but some of our city and county clients have required us to put that drainage on the profile sheets. And so having that extra vertical space really helps in doing that. So what we're going to do is just do plan sheets, and then we'll do separate profile sheets. So we'll start with the plan sheets. We'll choose our sheet seed here. And since the sheet seed is set up for a detail scale of 50, we'll just change that to 40. And so the first thing we always want to do is look in our bottom left corner down there. And this time we actually do want to identify a path element. And I do that before I start typing anything in here, because what you'll see is if you start typing stuff in here, such as your group name or your name of your models, it's going to change as soon as you click this. So now we've got BLUS1. That's fine for the group name. What I'm going to do now is we'll just do roadway plan -01 like we've been doing before, because we want to make sure we have 2 digits there. That just helps increment if you ever get to more than 9 sheets. So if you start getting double-digit sheets, then that will help you with how everything comes into your P sets and your sheet navigator and all of that. So working kind of down the list here, so we've got our group. That's good. You can add a description. I've never actually done that. It's usually pretty self-explanatory when you name it as the alignment. Let's start back here. I know there's really nothing here, but at least we have the alignment and the alignment annotation here to kind of tell us where we are. Really what I want to do is make sure that I grab some of this arc in here, or the arc, the radius, so that you can see what happens with the plan sheets when you have to deal with that. So you can either just kind of arbitrarily click out here, or you can just key in. I'll just key in. It's starting to beep at me. 93. So sometimes if you get off this dialogue too much, it starts kind of yelling at you. It'll make a noise. And I don't know, dialogue's a little finicky sometimes. So if you are running into issues, just close out of the dialogue and start it again, because it's not worth trying to mess with it. So you can see we're going to get a pretty good sheet right here with some strange things happening. It's trying to follow this arc by creating these boundary chords. So you can see there's essentially 5 points along that boundary chord that it's trying to create. What's going to end up happening is we kind of want to eliminate that and square that off with the sheet once we get this done. So first, let's finish our stop location. It doesn't really, you can see it doesn't really matter where I stop. Let's just get 3 sheets in here, and I'll click. So it's just saying identify path endpoint. And so right now I'm kind of in like a hold until I click again to accept all of these sheets. So that gives me an opportunity to play around with some of these settings. So length is going to be fine. That's going to be set up by your detail scale, and the left and right offset will be adjusted based on that too. In some of my previous sheets, we did overlap way back in 10.7 or whenever FDOT started with ORD. We were using some overlap, but we're not doing that anymore. And what I'm going to do is just set this boundary chords to like 2, so that it makes it a lot easier for me to come back and adjust the boundary chords in a second, and I'll show you how to do that. If you're not done creating sheets, you can always turn off create drawing, create your sheets, and then come back and make them later once you go into the name boundary tool. We'll create them right now, and I typically always show the dialog because there's some changes I want to make. And you can see that I changed that boundary chord. Now we've only got the single point here, and that'll help us going forward. So I'm just going to click to accept. We'll get our dialog to pop up here, and it's kind of up to you. I'm kind of in between on this, but it might be okay to just leave BLUS1 roadway plan 1, especially if you have other plan sheets that are along other alignments. So for now, we'll just leave that there. So group name dash name of the plan. You can always choose to just eliminate the group name if you want, or you could do whatever you want here, but just make sure you're consistent, I think, is the biggest key there. So let's just change this to 40 scale. And again, for plan sheets, typically the only annotation it's going to put down is like a north arrow. So I avoid that because I would typically put my north arrow and or scale inside my text file. So I don't want it to put any annotation in here, and it would put that annotation in your drawing models, which I just feel like that becomes difficult, especially if you ever want to delete sheets. Now you've got annotation inside of these drawing models. If you've got to move sheets around or do something, you lose all of that text. So I always would say to do all of your text labeling inside of a text file, and then I essentially put nothing in this file. I only have references, and then I create my drawing and sheet models, and that's it. There's not really any reason to be in here other than that. So we'll just keep moving down here and just see it's already saying a 40 by name boundary. Again, you could add it to sheet index. If you do, just make sure you're adding it to the correct folder. And it's just going to open model. So open model just means it's going to open the model of the last sheet it creates. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. And then we end up in the last sheet here, and you can see it was still using the sheet seed that we had utilized previously. We had the issue of so my cell isn't working here because I didn't go change the item type and update the item type library prior to creating these sheets, so that's not going to work. But if you go back and look at the previous video, I do go through how to update that. And you don't really need to worry about that if you're using a new file. The only reason it's happening to me is because I'm using an old file. I actually had to update this file from 10.11 prior to starting this video. So that's the only reason that's not working. If you have a brand new file, you shouldn't have to worry about it. Let's go back to the default model real quick and take a look at these boundaries. So we can see our boundaries here, and let's specifically go to number 2. And you can see how this is shifted off of the sheet, and that's the issue that I'm talking about. So if we come in here and turn on constructions, so constructions was off because it's not on in the sheet seed, which is fine because typically you don't really care about seeing these except for in this instance where I need to do some adjustments to this. So what we're going to have to do is first, it looks like I can slide this up the sheet a little bit more so that I capture some of this stuff. So it's really easy to right click the reference for the drawing model and just move it. And I would just move it vertically up a little bit, maybe try and center this in the sheet a little bit. We could probably go up even more. Really what I'm trying to do is make sure like along this match line, I would see the entire road because I don't really want to lose anything. And that's kind of some of the difficulty with this is trying to capture everything and not missing some of these things that get chopped off. So we still got tons of space up top here. So we're getting a little better. Let's just use that for now. You don't have to be absolutely perfect, but I think we're okay over here, and we're about as good as we're going to get over here without, blowing off the sheet over here. So the next thing I want to do in order to fix this shape is I want to right click. You can right click, the boundary here and activate. And I want to activate this default model. So what that's basically doing for me now is I'm now drawing in the default model. I don't really care what I'm drawing on. I mean, we can just draw on like non-plotting element to make it easier. But what I want to do is I want to draw some lines, and you can snap to the border here. Basically what I'm doing is drawing the border in my default model. So I usually like to control save and then control save settings. So control S, control F, and then deactivate. And then we can go look in our default model now. And I've got that box sitting out here. Let's just rotate the view to that box. And what I need to do now is start adjusting this name boundary to this box. But I have to stay along this edge, and this edge need to stay here. So that's basically my match line. So at 205 and at 199. So I have to bring, it's a little bit tricky at first to kind of understand what you're trying to do. But you can see by limiting the number of boundary chords that I have, it just limits the number of points that I have to adjust. This point, I'm going to slide up here where the intersection of the edge of the sheet and the match line is. We'll use this point to kind of slide down here. And then I'm going to insert. You can always insert vertices if you need to. Insert that point there. And then slide this one up to the intersection here. Now I've got this sheet adjusted to my actual boundary. So when you go back into the sheet, chances are that might not perfectly line up, which is fine, because I know that this corner needs to go right there. So again, I can just move this point there. And now my sheet is nicely clipped into the boundary. So that's pretty much how you would go about doing that. Next thing we'll do is move on to doing a profile view. For the profile sheets, I wanted to start in the actual alignment file because the annotation for this profile element over here is actually going to come from the file where it's drawn in. So in this case, in the alignment file. So I've got an alignment over here I just put together it's just a dummy alignment. It's just drawn on center line, same as the center line alignment. And what we want to do is begin, if we go look, we've got profile. As soon as we draw that, we get this profile annotation here. Now that comes directly from the feature definition. It has this profile annotation. This is all the stock FDOT stuff. If you want to use that, that's fine. Most of you are probably going to be fine just using that, but I've gone ahead and kind of fine-tuned some of their stuff to make it look a little better. What that does for me is if they decide to change something, mine kind of stays unaffected. And as they've added things over the years, I've just kind of taken them and added them to my feature definition. So it kind of goes both ways. Like I can always add stuff that they put in, but kind of help keep some of my stuff the same if I know it's working and looking good. So this is the group, and then all the definitions are going to be down here. What we want to do here is if you're just going to use these definitions, that's fine. Go ahead and just leave this alone and you can move on to the next step. But if you want to have your own definitions, or if you're working in the managed workspace that I've set up here at Consor, you can open up this library, and sometimes it does take a second to open up. So just be aware of that. You can open up the groups, the definitions, and If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you've probably seen this console main dgen lib. But like if you've watched my labeling video, I talk about how I have that set up to kind of contain all of our custom console stuff. So you could put any number of things in here. You can have your text favorites, your labels, your text styles, dimension styles, and you can also start putting annotations in there if you want. And what that lets you do is just go grab the annotations that are in this dgen lib and bring them into the dgen file that you're currently in. So I'm going to delete. First, I need to delete all of the definitions. So these are all just the stock DOT definitions. I'm going to make those go away. And then I'm going to delete profile annotation. So what I want to do is first add all of my definitions in here. So I've got mostly the same definitions, mostly the same names and all of that stuff. I've just gone in and maybe changed what the text favorite is or adjusted where the insertion point is just to kind of get things to be a little more consistent. And that's how I am. I like to make everything look just right. So I'm just going to copy all of these from the library into my file, paste, and I want to make sure I do the definitions first so that all the definitions are here in this file so that when I go grab the annotation, profile annotation group here, it's all there. You can see I've got a couple other annotation groups in here, PGL left, PGL right, and profile annotation. I think going forward, it might not be necessary to have those. The only reason I have those is because in the past, there has been strip grade annotation in the annotation definitions. And what that does is just puts like the elevation of the proposed profile along the bottom of the sheet. I'm sure most of you have seen that. We've probably all gotten comments about how people don't like it or why is it there, yada, yada. And usually the response is just, well, it's standard DOT annotation. Like, I'm not really sure what they want us to do about it. But I've been looking at the latest FDM and their plan and profile sheet, and the profile view does not have strip grade annotation on it. I don't see any information in the actual chapters of the sheet that say you need to do it. So what I'll probably end up doing is just getting rid of it. Oftentimes it's just, we get comments on it and I feel like it doesn't provide a lot of value because people don't understand what it is. So that's really the only reason I have these different ones. I would put like elevation left, elevation right to differentiate the two if I had two PGLs. But for now, we can just grab this profile annotation and bring it down here and paste. And if we want to go in and manage this, we can go look and just make sure. Again, we're still in 10.12 and we still have display bugs with dark mode, but they're all here. All of the annotation groups are here. You just kind of have to click through and see them, unfortunately. And I'm going to find strip grade annotation, which is right here. And I'll just remove it from my annotation definitions here, or from my group, I guess. It's still present down in the definitions. Like if you wanted to add it back in later, it's still there. But you can see that there's this existing strip grade annotation as well. Like that used to be placed at the bottom of the sheets too. It was like every 100 feet or whatever, it would put the elevation of the existing ground along the bottom of the sheet as well. It looks like they've completely done away with all of that annotation. But to do the existing strip grade annotation, that annotation definition would actually need to be in the GDTMRD file on the feature definition for this terrain model. So one other thing we need to make sure we go do is, I'm going to open up my properties a minute. And since we deleted the original profile annotation, my center line here probably doesn't currently have an annotation group. So if you look at grade line here, we've got no annotation group because I deleted it. So all you got to do is come in here and re-add profile annotation, and we're good to go. So now that has an annotation group. One of the other things that we've done in the past is like if you have like a ditch profile or something in here, that will be on, ditch, whatever. It's like special ditch left, special ditch right. So that will create different, special ditch left and right here in your feature symbologies. And if you want it to utilize that same profile annotation, you just got to make sure that you come into the feature symbology for that line and change the annotation group to this profile annotation that we're using here. So now that we have our profile annotation all set up, we can move on to the actual profile sheet. So here we are in our profile sheet here. I've got the alignment attached, and we've got two views open showing the plan view and the attached long section down here. So the profile view for BLUS1. I also attached the plan sheets here for our Plan RD99 test. I'll just set these to more of a transparent, so they're just a little more screen back. I reference those in here because I want to line up my profile sheets with my plan sheets. So I just want to make sure, I'm starting at 193 here with my profile. So the first thing I'm going to do is open Explorer back up. Like my profile annotations, I've also got profile sheet annotations set up here in my console main dgen lib here. So we'll just open up these annotation groups and we want to look at the drawing. So I've got these two grids. So I've got a 40 scale grid and a 50 scale grid. And then if we come down here into profile drawing, I've got my 40 and 50 scale grid stuff in here. So what I want to do is just copy. I'm going to do 40 scale since that's what we did the sheets at. And I'm going to copy these drawing definitions down in here into profile drawing, paste those here, and then copy this into my groups, profile drawing, paste. So now I've got my profile grid here ready to go. And we can go take a look at that real quick. So there's a couple things I think in here that we want to take a look at. I don't think I have any favorites set up. I'm pretty sure this is all pretty standard. So I've got my vertical axis title, I guess, here. I've got a favorite here for my scale, 1:40. So that'll just put that 1:40 scale in there. And then I've got my profile title placeholder, and you'll see what happens when you do that. Ideally, what you would do is instead of using this text favorite, so this would just be telling you what alignment we're looking at when we create the profile sheet. What you would do is go into your project specific text favorite dgen lib. And you've probably seen that in some of the other videos, but it's just in that symbology dgen lib folder. You can put a dgen lib in there and start placing text favorites in there. So let's see, if you go to drawing production annotations and click this button right here, you can see your text favorite manager. And so we have a project text favorites right here. And so, there's an excess title state. That's the cross section one. So this is that special detour. So what we could do is copy this one into this actual file. So this isn't really ideal because that means the only place you can access this particular text favorite that we're going to copy is in this file. That's why it's always best to actually go into this project text favorites create a new text favorite or just copy this one and then edit the text to match whatever baseline or center line that you're using. So we'll just paste this up here. So that's basically the same. And all we really need to do is we'll just call this, this is BL US 1, and we'll just put test after it so that we know we're using that. I'll a tab. And then always make sure you hit save. So that's saved in there. And we should be able to come in here now. It's probably going to be all the way at the top. Yep, right, it's at the bottom. So if we go here, I still call it special detail. Let's change the name real quick. Rename the title US 1 test. Okay. And then come in here, come down. Oh, I didn't save. Yeah, always got to remember to hit save. Good lesson to learn there. It's one test. So now when we create our sheets, that will show up at the top of the sheet. So that's one thing you need to make sure you do. I mean, yeah, you could get away with just putting this text favorite here because most likely you're probably only going to use this text favorite in this file anyway, so that's probably okay. But if you wanted to be a little more organized, you could collect all of your text favorites in your project-specific text favorites. So we can just kind of go through, pop open all these things. Most of these things are just pretty standard stuff straight from the FDOT standard one. So really, yeah, it's the only thing we're doing here is we're adding this favorite, and you'll see it at the top of the sheet. And then I've got my own scale. I might be using the FDOT one. I can't remember. But if you ever wanted to change the way that scale looked, so if you go look at scale 1 to 40, which is probably in here, profile. Yeah, I'm not using mine. I'm using theirs. So if we look in here, profile labels, not entirely sure where that's workspace annotation. Here we are, scale 1 to 40. So that's what it's going to give me right there, scale 1 to 40. So if you ever wanted to, if you want to say horiz and you want to abbreviate that or vert, that's something you can do in here. If you wanted to add a colon here after scale or whatever it is, you could always make your own text favorite and stick it in your either project specific or main dgen live, or just copy it into this file, edit it, and then change it in your annotation definition. So that's pretty much it for this annotation definition. And we'll close this as well. So you've got that there. So now we want to start laying out our sheets. And as always, we should make sure we're in the proper annotation scale for our sheets. So I'll switch that to 40, and then we can click the name boundary tool, and that will come up. And this time we want to do civil profile, and we'll use our project 11 by 17 profile only this time. Change the detail scale to 40. And the first thing it wants us to do in the lower left-hand corner is identify the profile view. And I've got roadway profile 01. I'd previously typed that in here as I was doing the video. So that's all set. My group is all set as BLUS1. What I want to do is start this at the same station as my plan sheet. So that would be 193.00. So if I come down here and click profile start point, oh, it didn't hold. So again, sometimes it's good to make sure you click in the view before you start messing around up here. If I click, now it's going to start at 193. You can see as I move this profile, it is shifting the sheets to coincide with the actual profile. And that is because we have use active vertical on, so it's moving the sheets with the active vertical. And we can just kind of click. So, the problem here is my profile doesn't extend all the way beyond here, so that it's going to make the sheet end right there, unfortunately. We could try and key in, let's see, what's the end station here, 211. Let's try and key in stop station 211 and see if we can get it to push beyond that. So yeah, we can get that to happen, but you see what's happening, and this is potentially an issue, but not really a big deal, especially when you're doing plan and profile sheets. Our length here is 560. The length of a profile sheet needs to be a little bit smaller because you've got the uh, elevation scales on either side that take up additional space that you would have for your plan view. And I'll show you guys in a second once we get these sheets created, but it seems like this is the intent of FDOT. When you create regular plan sheets, I checked in both my drawing seed, which was derived from FDOT anyway, and DOT's stock 10.12 drawing seed, and they both would put in 600-foot length sheets, plan sheets for 40 scale. But if you go and switch to like a plan over profile, that sheet seed is set up to line up the plan and the profile widths. So I can see when they're both in the same sheet, you want them to show the same limits. But if you have plan and profile sheets, it's probably not the biggest of deals. But if you were concerned with that, when you're creating your plan sheets, you could manually go edit the length of those plan sheets when you're cutting them. So if you're cutting 40 scale, you'd do 560. And if you were doing 50 scale, that's 700. Our plan sheets cut at 750 per each drawing seed. So that's why we've got this little bit of extra space here from 211. So basically we're getting an extra 40 feet per sheet. So we got 3 sheets. So that's 120 feet. So if we go back to like 209.80, then we should be good. So that'll help that line sort of line up, but at least give us 3 sheets. Moving down the line, vertical exaggeration is 10. That's pretty typical. Your available profile height, that's set from your drawing seed, and that's just the height of the actual sheet. And our top and bottom clearance, pretty much all this stuff I never actually touch. And all this stuff. So right now we want to create drawing. We're going to use trains, use active. Pretty much everything is all set here for us to identify profile endpoint. So that's the next thing we're going to do, looking in the lower left-hand corner. So that keys in the end of the stationing, and then we data point one more time to place the boundaries. Oh, it didn't take once I came back in here and did it, it didn't take my group, which is fine. But again, if you want this group to be fixed, you could just change this later. Go into the properties and change it. But for now, I'm just going to get rid of this. So we'll just get rid of this, get rid of this. And we want to make sure we're going to 40. And then we want this to use that annotation group that we brought in. You can see it's automatically bringing in the profile grid 55 scale. It basically automatically brings that in with these sheets. So I'm just going to change that to 40 because that's what I want to use here. And really what you could do is if you were using the 50 scale, you just bring that in. You might run into the issue of it creating like a duplicate. You just want to make sure you delete any duplicates and make sure you just have the one that you brought in from your DGen lib available. So we've got 40 scale here, 40 scale here. Again, if you want to add sheet index, make sure it's in the correct folder. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. Okay, now we're in our last profile sheet. I'm just going to actually move into the second one because that's got more of the information. So you can see we've got our annotation in here. It's put some vertical curves in here. It's annotated the grades. We've got the scale down here. It has annotated the existing ground annotation because that's coming from my actual GDTM file. If you wanted to get rid of this, you would have to go into the GDTM file and remove that annotation group from that feature symbology for the existing ground terrain. That's the way that you would get rid of that. And you can see that since we removed the strip grade annotation for our actual alignment, that's not showing up here. And that's the reason my scale sits a little bit higher on these sheets, is because it was set up to avoid that strip grade annotation. So if you know that you're not using strip grade annotation, you could go into, if we go back into default model, and you have to be in the default model. What's going on there? You have to be in the default model to edit the feature definitions, or the annotation definitions, excuse me. So we'll go into there, manage, and I think it was vertical axis title. That's where that's coming in. So this horizontal, or it's the vertical offset, and that's basically from the bottom right corner of the sheet, since its position is right bottom. And you would just maybe make this, if we make this 0.1, for example, save that. It's not going to do anything right away, but if we go into, let's go into 2, since 2 is the one that has everything. We go into here and we want to remove drawing model annotations, and I'm just going to remove it from this one only, since this is the one we'll be working in. So you can see it didn't remove the annotations for my elements, which is really nice. If I wanted to remove the strip grade annotation, so I want to do all drawing models, no. And I want to remove the annotation for this, and it will remove the strip grade annotation for you. Like I said, if you don't want that to show up, just make sure the annotation group is essentially detached from that existing ground terrain feature symbology. So what we can do is come back and annotate the drawing model again, and this will bring in, making sure we're on 44, bring in my updated annotation definition for this and slide this down. And you can see that we brought in that BL US1 test. So this just kind of tells us, it's an extra label I like to put on the sheets that tells you which alignment you're looking at, which profile you're looking at. And so because we edited this right here, that showed up for us. We put the correct text favorite in there. One of the other things I like to do is oftentimes, like these VPI labels right here, they can get in the way. A lot of these vertical labels can get in the way of things, especially if you have to label a lot of profiles, if you've got ditch profiles down here, if you've got other things getting in the way. What we can do is, I like to come in here and actually drop this annotation, because I want this little triangle to stay here, my VPI triangle. And I'll delete this. I'll open up my civil labeler. This is just some of these cleanup things that you can do, that you have to do later. And the good thing is, when you place civil labeler annotations, those are not connected to any of removing annotations using these two tools. So you're safe there. And we're just going to go into our profile annotation, and I've got this VPI label annotation that I use. And so we're just going to identify the profile element, and then I like to just snap it to the center of this triangle. Center. Right there. And whip this here. So now we've just got a little bit of a cleaner look here. It's got the same VPI station and elevation right there. You can also do that with these low point spots here. So if you wanted to drop this, delete this. And the important thing is, you can delete this little thing right here too. This is like the data point tag handle thing. You can get rid of that. Important thing is that this is just an arc. It doesn't say something like annotation cell arc. That's when you know it's linked to the annotation groups and will be removed when you remove or replace annotation. So same thing over here. This is just a shape and not an annotation cell. So the one problem is, if you do this extra stuff here and come back and remove and place annotation, it is going to place that annotation again, but it's pretty easy to just remove the extra annotations that you don't need. So again, I just use VPI label, select this, select the center of the circle, And instead of VPI, I can just come in here and this text is just normal text. Like these are actual fields that are reading the station and elevation of the profile. But these you can just change. So we'll just call it VLP. And now I've got a label that I'm not stuck with this big vertical label here that's difficult to read or maybe gets in the way. I've got a label that I can move around and adjust wherever I need it to be. Another thing I like to do is I haven't found out a good way to fix this actually with the annotation. So this is kind of what it does. It just draws, it's a cell and it's a standard length cell that it draws. And then it puts this annotation cell here with the text of the vertical curve and the K length. What I like to do is just I'll delete one side and we'll drop this. So you got to drop it. Sometimes you got to drop it a couple times just to make sure you get it into its just base elements like complex shapes and lines. We can delete one of these arrows, extend this over to here, move the arrow. I just like to do this. This is the way I'm used to seeing vertical curve labels, and it just makes more sense for me. So something like that, just making that simple. Another thing we can do with some of this annotation that I have is a lot of people like to see the elevations at the edges of the sheets instead of the strip grade stuff. So I've got this annotation that does this. One thing I've been doing just to make sure this annotation actually sticks to this point is I'll draw. You can't snap this annotation to the intersection of the edge of the border and the line. It won't pick up the elevation of the actual line that you're trying to do, which is kind of unfortunate. So what I tend to do is just get like a non-plotting line and I'll offset it a very tiny bit, like 0.1 or whatever. And we don't need to make a copy. We can just slide this guy over a little tiny bit. And it's not going to make a huge difference at the edge of the sheet here if it's 0.1 off. But what that does is when we come and put the elevation existing and place it, it's asking me to choose. First, you got to choose, okay, what's the elevation? What's the element you want to see the elevation of? So we click this. Then we snap to the intersection of that line and our non-plotting line. And we stick it over here. It gives us this elevation. So the difference between elevation existing and elevation proposed is this will come in a little bit gray as opposed to using elevation proposed, which you're not going to be able to see it in this view, but my pen table knows to search for these different levels. So this one's on text profile grades. This one's on text minor. So my pen table is set up to make text minor a little bit gray so that it's the same color as this ends up on the sheets as well. Just one thing you can do to kind of clean up the sheets. I know I get comments on this all the time about putting elevations at the edges of sheets. If I dug into it a little more, maybe I could figure out how to do this with the actual annotation group, but this is usually pretty simple to come in here and add to profile sheets after the fact. And again, this stuff doesn't go away when you remove any of the annotation. And then if you're using my Consort roadway, some of you that work for Consort here, there's the various other labels in here. We've got, begin profile labels, end profile labels. So all this stuff is available if you want to use that. That's all coming from the Consort main. So let's go take a look at our sheet. So our sheet looks pretty good. And this time it's using the roadway EOR, our Tacitus Kilgore EOR. And that's because this profile one was set up to use this sheet border model, the one for the roadway EOR, as opposed to the one we switched over to the drainage EOR for the plan. So that works out pretty good. And again, since this was a brand new file, I've got this actually showing up. You can come in here and edit a single sheet. Bring this over here. If you delete title top and title bottom, You can do your roadway profile, hit OK, and we're good. So that's pretty handy. One thing that you could do is if you wanted to, if you have a lot of profile sheets, what I would suggest is you want to back out of this file, and then you would open up the edit multiple sheets. And since I'm in ProjectWise Explorer right now, the only way to use this function is to actually have your ProjectWise drive set up appropriately. And so that's why I want to be out of any sheet files that I'm going to be editing. So right now, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to kind of show you how it would be done. And so we would go ahead and browse and PWB drive, get to this King. I'm going to browse to our roadway folder within here. And once I hit OK here, this will probably take a second to load. And it had to scan through all the files. So I had like 93 files in there. So the more files you have, the longer this takes to build this whole available sheets list here. But essentially what you want to do is go find, you could find your Plan RD99 tests. And what we're trying to do is add the sheets from the available sheets down into the sheets to process. And to select sheets, you need to make sure you're over here. So select these sheets, and where's my profile? So it's not showing me my profile right now because I haven't checked this file in to ProjectWise yet, and it hasn't synced to ProjectWise Drive, so it doesn't see that this file actually has sheets in it yet. So we'll use this Plan RD99 test as an example, and we can move those down here. And again, you can select all, right-click, bulk update sheet information. And I just want to edit. We'll just call this roadway plan and hit OK. And all you have to do after that is hit your commit changes. And it'll say it's done. So what that did is just put those changes into the file, but in order to get them to actually be there, you got to go touch each one of those sheet files. So I'll show you that in a second. The way you can get around that is by using sheet index and then having all your sheets indexed. And then there's a button in the sheet index that lets you update all the fields and all the files really quickly. And I will probably end up doing a video later on how to use the sheet index. So we'll go over Plan Set Manager again, and then how to utilize the sheet index to update all of those things. But for now, I think we're pretty much good with our profile sheet. We've got our sheets. We've got our annotation. We did some editing to the annotation to get it to look a little bit cleaner. We added a few labels to the end of the sheet. We could have done the same thing over here too, but just as an example, we changed the location of the scale. So we slid that down a little bit because we don't need to worry about our strip grade anymore. So we did some modifying of that. And next, we'll just go back into the Plan RD real quick and show you how to update the sheet information. So here we are back in the roadway plan sheet, and you can see that as soon as I jumped into the file, this updated for me. And if we go look at the models, you can see the description has been added for roadway plan. That's how it controls this particular one. So the middle is controlled by that. If you remember, this is an older file, so if I wanted to do a double stack, I'd actually have to get rid of this cell. Or I'd actually have to add if I added my cell back in and made sure that I updated my item types, everything would work fine. But just a issue with the older file. We saw in the profile with a brand new file that it worked just fine. So it's just an issue with using an older file. So if we go check out that first sheet, hopefully, I don't know if it's going to show up on the video, but you'll see like it'll flash real quick that it's updating the roadway plan. Like if I were to go print these right now, only O2 would say roadway plan. The other two would say nothing right now because I haven't gone and touched them yet. Let's see if we can get it to show. Yeah. So you could see it just change real quick right there. So now that I've touched that one and I've touched that one, now all that information has been brought into the sheet and loaded. So that's the way to get all of your sheet labels in here pretty quickly using that plan set manager. So that just about does it for the plan and profile sheets. Hope this was helpful to everyone. And um, the next video in the series is a video I did a while back for cross sections, but I think it's still pretty good. I did it right around when 1010 came out. But there's a lot of good stuff in there about setting up your annotation groups and configuration variables and things like that. So if you were confused about how to get some of this stuff to work, that video is really good about showing you where all the configuration variables are. I think for now that video's pretty solid. The only thing that I would consider updating in that video is maybe the annotation definitions, similar to what I have in the profile sheet or profile stuff here. I've got cross-section annotation definitions too that I use. And I think those are a little more helpful because I think there's more variation in how cross sections get labeled depending on the type of project you have. And typically you have more alignments that you have cross sections for. So all these things. But I hope you get a chance to go check out that video. And obviously, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to ask those on any of the videos. And hopefully I'll get around to doing a sheet navigator video as well, since I really just started utilizing that as well. And I think it's a really handy tool now that it actually works like it's supposed to. So I'll do a quick video on that as well to show you guys how to use that. But thanks for listening, and I hope you have a good day.